They left her in the snow like she was nothing. But Eli Morgan had buried enough love for one lifetime. He wasn't about to let death take another. A child abandoned, a man hollowed by grief. Together, they might still have something worth saving. The crying didn't sound human at first, just a sharp, broken noise that ripped through the wind and made Eli Morgan stop mid-step, boots crunching to a halt atop the ridge. He turned his head, heart already thudding before reason caught up. The air was cold enough to bite lungs raw, wind rolling down off the peaks with a weight of curse behind it. But still the sound came again, thin, jagged, trailing off like it didn't have the strength to finish. Eli scanned the white. Nothing but snow, boulders and broken brush, the remnants of last night's storm lingering like ghosts. He almost turned back. Almost. But there was again, closer now, a sound that made his throat tighten because it was no coyote or bird. It was a child. He moved fast, following the direction of the sound with practiced eyes, breath rising in plumes as he crested a dip in the slope. And then he saw her, half buried in a drift, skin pale as the snow around her, hair matted to her cheeks, and lips blue. She couldn't have been more than 6. No coat, no boots, just a cotton dress soaked through with ice and clinging to a body already too still. Eli dropped to his knees. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse, hands already shaking as he reached for her. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. One hand twitched. That was all. He wrapped her in his coat without thinking, pressing her small frame to his chest. She didn't respond. No si ver, no kurai. That scared him more than anything. "Come on, kid. Don't go quiet on me now," he muttered, forcing his legs to move, lifting her as gently as he could. She weighed nothing, not even enough to warm his arms. He walked fast, almost ran, back to the cabin, cursing under his breath with every step. She must have been left during the storm, maybe before. No way she got out here on her own, and no sign of a wagon or camp nearby, just snow and silence. By the time he kicked the door open and staggered inside, his heart was thudding in a different rhythm entirely. Panic, cold and familiar, crept up his spine. He hadn't felt this in months. Not since the day they lowered Anna's body into the ground. Not since the fever took her quick and merciless and left him with only a grave and a silence he couldn't outrun. But now this little girl, this broken thing in his arms. He set her down by the hearth and worked quickly. Blankets, dry clothes, water warmed by the fire. His hands moved like they remembered, though it had been a long time since he'd cared for anyone. The girl didn't speak, didn't cry, but she was breathing barely. That was something. Eli stayed by her side all night, feeding the fire until the woodpile shrank dangerously low. She didn't wake, just clung to the edge of life like it might slip free at any second. And still he didn't sleep. At first light, her eyes opened. Not wide, not fully, but enough for him to see they were green. Not bright like Anna's had been, but mossy, dark, guarded. She blinked once, twice. "You're all right," Eli said softly. "You're safe." The girl didn't speak, just stared at him like she wasn't sure whether he was real. He tried again. "What's your name?" She swallowed, lips cracked. It took her a long time to find her voice. "Willa." It broke him a little, hearing it. Not just because it sounded like something pulled from the ashes, but because she said it like it was the only thing she had left. "Well, Willa," he said, clearing his throat, "you're lucky I walk early." She didn't smile, didn't nod, just closed her eyes again. He let her rest. That day passed slow, full of small, careful movements. He made her broth, coaxed a few sips into her. She took to the blankets like they were armor. Didn't speak again for hours. When she finally did, it wasn't what he expected. "They left me," she whispered. "Eli Brotze." "Who?" he asked, though he already knew. "Mr. Darby and the others. Said I was too slow. Wagon got stuck. They took the horses. Said I'd freeze anyway." He closed his eyes. That name, Darby, he knew it. Led a group heading west 2 weeks ago. Thought he could shortcut through the pass before the weather broke. Fool. He must have decided Willa wasn't worth the extra weight. Left her in the snow like an old boot. Eli felt something simmer under his ribs. Not anger. Not yet. just a weight he'd thought buried with his wife. "You're not going back to them," he said. Willa didn't reply. She didn't need to. The next few days passed in quiet survival. Willa hardly left the fire. She moved like a bird too long caged, flinching at sudden noises, shrinking from open doors. Eli didn't press her. He knew that kind of silence. He'd worn it himself after the coffin lowered, after the last mourner left, and the cabin stopped smelling like flowers. But even in her silence, Willa watched everything. When he chopped wood, she tracked each swing. When he cooked, she studied his hands. She never asked questions, but he could feel them in her stare. One night, while he was mending a torn bit of her dress, she asked, "Why are you alone?" He didn't answer right away. "My wife got sick. There wasn't time." "Oh," she said. Then after a pause, "I'm sorry." He looked up surprised. Her voice had changed. Softer, braver. "Me too," he said. By the week's end, Willa began to laugh. Not much, not loud, but once when a squirrel darted across the porch and nearly took Eli's boot with it, she let out a short, startled giggle. It stopped them both in their tracks. She looked scared afterward, like she'd done something wrong. But Eli just smiled. "Good to know your lungs work." She blinked, then grinned. It was quick, vanishing almost before it started, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, the cabin felt like it was holding something warm again. But peace doesn't last. It was late afternoon when the knock came. Not soft, not scared, hard, deliberate. Eli rose slow, setting down the pot he'd been stirring. Willa froze where she sat, eyes going wide. "Get behind the bed," he said quietly. She didn't argue, just ran. The knock came again, louder. Eli opened the door. 3 men stood outside, 2 mounted, 1 on foot. The one closest had a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a scar down the side of his jaw. "Evening," the man drawled. Eli didn't reply. "We're looking for someone," the man said. "Little girl, about so high." He held a hand waist level. "Ran off from our group. Dangerous out here for someone like her. Figured maybe you seen her." Eli didn't blink, didn't move. "Can't say I have." Scarjaw smiled wider. "That's so. Plenty of snow out there. If you left someone behind, might be best to keep riding. Not much survives in that cold." The man's smile faltered. From inside, a floorboard creaked. The man's eyes shifted. Eli stepped forward, blocking the view. "Long way back to town," he said calmly. "Best be off before night." Scarjaw stared at him for a long moment. Then he tipped his hat. "We'll be back." Eli shut the door. His hands were trembling. Behind him, Willa peeked around the bed frame. Her face was pale again. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know," Eli said, voice low. He looked at the fire, then at the rifle above the mantel. He hadn't touched it since Anna died. But now he reached for it. The rifle felt heavier than he remembered, though maybe it wasn't the weight of the iron that made his hands stiff. It was what it meant to take it down again. Eli Morgan had laid that weapon aside the day after Anna passed. Not from fear, not from cowardice, but because he'd sworn he'd had his fill of fighting the world. He'd done his years with the Rangers, lived through gunfire, outlaws, and the kind of long nights that never let a man sleep again. But grief had hardened him more than bullets ever did. And in that grief, he'd chosen silence. Isolation. Peace, if you could call it that. But peace didn't last, not in a place like this. And certainly not when a little girl's safety hung in the balance. Willa sat huddled in the corner of the bed frame, still wrapped in the patchwork quilt he'd given her, watching him with wide, unreadable eyes. She didn't ask questions, didn't cry, didn't beg him not to go after the men. She just watched, like she already understood that this was no longer a choice for either of them. Eli checked the chamber, then moved through the cabin with a precision he hadn't touched in years, bolting windows, lowering the shutters, reinforcing the door with a crossbar thick as his forearm. Willa tracked every move, silent as snow. "They'll come when the sun drops," Eli said finally, glancing toward the small sliver of gold still clinging to the western horizon. They didn't look like the patient kind. Willa's fingers tightened around the edge of the quilt. "What if they take me again?" Eli knelt before her, rifle leaning against the wall behind him. His eyes, tired, lined but steady, met hers without flinching. They won't. That was all he said. That was all she needed. Night felt like a trap. No moon. No stars. Just cold pressing against the glass, and a silence so heavy it made every floorboard groan louder than it should. Eli didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, rifle across his lap, staring into the flames like they might tell him what to do. Every shadow outside felt like a threat. Every gust of wind against the walls made his fingers twitch toward the trigger. He hadn't felt fear like this in years, not even when Anna was sick. Back then, there had been hope to cling to, foolish or not. This was different. This was a child with no one left, and men coming to erase what little future she had. The knock came just past midnight. It was softer than before, which made it worse. Eli rose slowly, moving to the peephole he'd carved long ago during rougher days. Outside, only one man stood, different from the others. This one wore a coat too clean for travel and held his hat in both hands like he was coming to deliver condolences, not threats. Eli didn't trust it for a second. He cracked the door just wide enough to speak. "You get lost." The man smiled politely. "Name's Merritt. I'm here about the girl." Eli didn't answer. "She belongs to my brother-in-law's party. Got turned around in the pass. Damned unfortunate business. We've been real worried about her." "She was left in a snowbank," Eli said flatly. "Doesn't sound too worried to me." Merritt's smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened. "Now, I understand how it looks. I really do. But these are complicated times, mister." Eli didn't offer his name. Merritt sighed. "Look, I don't want trouble. Just here to take the girl back where she belongs. She doesn't belong with people who left her to die." Merritt leaned closer, and now the smile dropped. "That girl saw something. Something that needs forgetting. We're just trying to keep things clean." Eli slammed the door in his face. For a long moment, the only sound was Willa's shallow breathing from the shadows behind the table. Then came the shouting. Boots outside. A command barked. A crash. The window at the back shattered inward, snow and glass spraying across the floor. Eli was already moving, dragging the table over for cover, sliding Willa beneath it, pressing a blanket around her for silence. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked up at him with the kind of quiet faith that shattered a man's heart. The first shot hit the door. The second took a chunk out of the wall above the hearth. Eli ducked low, braced the rifle, and fired once, then twice. Screams answered him. A body dropped just beyond the porch. Then came fire. One of the bastards tried to light a torch and toss it through the broken window, but Eli was faster. The torch hit snow, sputtering out before it caught. Then silence again. "Get out here, Morgan," came a voice, scar-jaws this time, crueler than before. "You're just drawing this out." Eli didn't answer. He moved to the back, peeking through a side slit. Saw shadows. 6, maybe 7 men. More than he expected. This wasn't about taking the girl anymore. This was cleanup. This was making sure the only story told was theirs. He turned back to Willa. "There's a trapdoor," he said quietly. "Behind the stove. Crawl space goes under the house. Stay there. Don't make a sound." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then she just nodded and vanished behind the stove, lifting the panel with hands that didn't shake. Eli returned to the front, loaded 2 more rounds, waited. They came just before dawn, boots on the porch. Then the door splintered under the weight of a boot. Eli didn't shoot right away. He waited until the first one stepped through, then fired. The man went down screaming. The next stumbled over him, caught a blow from Eli's rifle stock to the face, then another to the throat. The third got inside, but not far. Eli dragged a shelf down, blocking the way, buying precious seconds. But they kept coming. A knife flashed, caught Eli in the side. He grunted, dropped to one knee, swung wild. The attacker fell back, but now blood stained the floor. He retreated toward the back, every breath fire. Scarjaw stepped through the smoke in chaos, grinning. "Should have handed her over, old man." Eli lifted the rifle again, but his arm shook. Scarjaw saw it. Then came the noise no one expected. A shot. Not from Eli. Scarjaw staggered. Blood bloomed at his shoulder. He turned and saw Willa, standing behind the stove, holding Eli's revolver in both tiny hands, her arms locked straight. You left me, she whispered. He lunged toward her. Eli moved faster. He tackled the man hard, sending both of them crashing into the table. They grappled, snarling like animals. Another shot rang out. Then silence. When it was over, Scarjaw lay still. Eli stood over him, blood seeping from the gash at his side, face pale, but eyes burning. The remaining men ran. Eli didn't chase. He turned to Willa. Her hands were still gripping the revolver, though it was empty now. She was shaking, but she didn't cry. He walked to her slowly. You all right? He asked. She nodded barely. He took the gun from her gently, set it down, then pulled her into his arms. You did good, he whispered. The cabin was wrecked. Blood, broken wood, shattered glass. But the sun was rising, and they were still alive. For now. Eli didn't sleep that day. Neither did Willa. They sat together on the cabin floor, backs against what remained of the table, the sun climbing slowly across the snow-slick windows, casting fractured gold across the wreckage. Smoke still drifted from the back wall, where a bullet had grazed the stove. The air smelled like gunpowder and pine, iron and ash. Outside, the last of the men had vanished into the trees, dragging their wounded and whatever story they'd choose to tell about what happened. But none of that mattered. The girl was safe. For now. And the man who'd come to forget how to feel had just spilled blood for a reason he couldn't name without breaking. Willa hadn't spoken since the shot. Not since she'd pulled the trigger and watched the man who left her die by her hand, or Eli's, or both. She just sat in silence, the revolver still near her feet, hands clenched in the folds of the blanket she'd wrapped around herself again. Eli didn't push her to speak. He knew better. Some pain took time to crack open. Some pain needed silence first. He checked the wound on his side with the dispassion of a man used to pain. Shallow, but it would need cleaning. The blood had crusted where the fabric stuck to it. He winced, ripped the shirt free, and Willa flinched at the sound. I'm all right, he said quietly, catching her eyes. Just a scratch. She didn't answer, but she moved closer, took the rag from his hand, and began to dab the wound with slow, careful motions. Her fingers were small but steady, like she'd done this before. He almost asked but stopped. The question sat heavy between them. Who had raised her? Who had taught her to clean wounds and stay quiet? Who had failed to protect her? He didn't need the answers. He already knew them. After she finished, she sat beside him again and said, Do they always come back? Eli looked toward the door, or what was left of it. He exhaled slow. Sometimes, he said, when a man's afraid to lose control, he keeps reaching for what he left behind. They said I saw something. You did. I don't remember. You will. Maybe not today. Maybe not all at once. But pieces come back. They always do. She looked down at her hands. What if I don't want them to? Eli reached over and gently closed her fingers into a fist. Then you take only the pieces that help you keep going. The rest you leave behind. The fire had long gone out, leaving the air sharp again, the cold sneaking in through the holes blown into the walls. Eli rose and started repairs, first clearing the broken glass, then reinforcing the window frames with scraps of wood from the shed. Willa helped without being asked. She swept the shards into a pile and packed snow around the baseboards where wind whistled through the cracks. For the first time, they worked like a team. Not protector and protected, not grief and survival, but something more solid, more fragile. A man and a child, each with enough ghosts between them to fill the valley, building something temporary with hands that had lost too much. As the afternoon waned, Eli stepped outside to haul what was left of the woodpile. The porch was streaked with dried blood, footprints half melted now, already softening under the winter sun. He stood there a moment, rifle slung across his shoulder, breathing in the silence. But something felt wrong. Not danger. Not quite. Just watched. He turned, scanning the tree line. Nothing. But a flicker, too small to be coincidence. A glint. Metal? Or just sun on snow? He dropped the wood and stepped forward, every inch of embracing. Then came the whistle. Not a bird call. A signal. Soft. 2 notes. Familiar. He froze. Only one man he knew used that signal. He whistled back. A figure stepped from the trees, wrapped in a travel cloak, face hidden beneath the brim of a snow-crusted hat. "Eli," came the voice, dry, raspy, tired. "Ilias Yov Klinshith." Harlan. Harlan Graves had been his closest friend once, back when the two of them rode with the Texas Rangers and shared the same rations, the same scars, and, once, a love for the same woman. He hadn't seen Harlan since the war ended, not since Eli laid Anna to rest and buried the part of himself that had once trusted men like Harlan. "What the hell are you doing here?" Eli asked low. Harlan stepped closer, lifting his hands in peace. "Saw the smoke. Heard things, too. Word spreads quick in these parts." Eli didn't lower the rifle. Harlan sighed. "Look, I ain't here for trouble. Just figured you might need a hand. We don't need anything. We?" Harlan's eyes narrowed, and then a grin tugged at the edge of his mouth. "That the girl I heard about? The one left for dead?" Eli stiffened. "What do you know about her?" "Told you. Word spreads. Men like Darby don't go quiet when they lose face. They spin tales. Loud ones. Claiming you kidnapped her. Shot first. Called you dangerous." Eli's mouth hardened to a line. "They left her. I picked her up half dead. I know. I believe you. But that don't change the fact that more men are coming. Not mercenaries, not bounty hunters. Worse. Worse. Deputized riders. Bought and paid for. Darby's money runs long. He wants that girl. He'll send someone with a badge to fetch her." Eli stared at the snow. Harlan continued. "I can help. Got friends. One of them's a judge down in Calhoun. Quiet type, but honest. If we ride out tonight, get ahead of it, we can make it there before Darby's lies catch up." Eli didn't answer. "Look," Harlan said, stepping closer. "I know you don't trust me. You got every right not to. But this ain't about you. It's about her." Eli turned, met his old friend's eyes. "I don't trust Easy anymore." Harlan nodded. "Neither do I." Behind them, the cabin door creaked. Willa stood there, arms folded tight, eyes wary. Harlan gave a small nod, his expression softening. "You must be Willa." She didn't reply. "You got a sharp look to you, like you see more than you say." Still nothing. Then, softly, "Are you like them?" Harlan's mouth twisted. "No, little miss. Not like them. I've seen what they do. I'm trying to stop it." Eli stepped forward. "We'll think about it. Come back at sundown." Harlan hesitated, then tipped his hat. "I'll be waiting." "Don't wait too long." He vanished into the trees. Eli and Willa stood in silence a long moment. Then she said, "Do you believe him?" "I don't know. Will we have to leave?" Eli looked back at the cabin. The repairs, the scorched wood, the quilt she'd claimed as her own. The carved horse she'd started to play with again. All of it. "I think we already did," he said. They packed light. Just food, water, the few warm clothes Willa hadn't outgrown. Eli left most of his tools behind, but took the rifle and his revolver. Willa carried a pouch of dried apples and the wooden horse. At dusk, they met Harlan at the edge of the forest. He had 2 horses, both sturdy, trail-wise. Willa didn't ask to ride alone. She climbed behind Eli, arms around his waist, head pressed against his back. As they rode west, the wind picked up, soft but biting. "Where are we going?" Willa asked, not raising her head. "To someone who might be able to help us." "Will they believe us?" "I don't know. Will they try to take me back?" Eli didn't answer. Instead, he reached back and covered her hand with his. They rode in silence as night swallowed the trail, but somewhere behind them, the cold wind carried voices. Men gathering, trails converging, a storm building not from snow but from something meaner. Something legal, and paid for. They weren't just running now. They were being hunted. The trail west was narrow and winding, a hard vein through the ribs of the mountains, and by nightfall, the trees had closed in so tight they could barely see 10 feet ahead. Eli let the horse guide itself most of the way. Old sorrel, named Dusty, more instinct than sight in that kind of dark, and he kept one hand on the reins, the other always near his sidearm. Harlan rode ahead, his frame barely a shape in the fog curling low over the trail, and Willa leaned against Eli's back, quiet as breath, her small fingers tangled in the wool of his coat. She hadn't said much since they'd left the cabin. He hadn't expected her to. Every so often, A sound would cut through the trees, a broken branch, a snap of frost under hoof, once even a low whistle of wind that rose too fast to be natural. Eli couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone out there. And he didn't think it was just animals. Men left tracks, scents, weight in the air. The forest felt too quiet now, like it was holding its breath. By midnight, they reached a clearing, just big enough for the three of them and the horses. Harlan dismounted, brushed snow from a fallen log, and nodded toward the center. "We rest here. Just a few hours. No fire." Eli helped Willa down, wrapped her in the extra blanket he'd stuffed in the saddlebag. She curled close beside him as they sat, back against the log, eyes fluttering but never quite closing. Harlan sat opposite, his rifle across his knees, face drawn and shadowed. "You think they're close?" Eli asked, voice low. Harlan didn't answer right away. He lifted his head, sniffed the air like a hound. "I think they're ahead." Eli stiffened. Harlan went on. "Calhoun's not far. Maybe 2 days if we push. But Darby's not stupid. He'll have sent word ahead. Maybe riders to block the road. Maybe worse. So we go around. Can't. Not with the girl. Terrain's too rough. And if we disappear off the main trail, we lose the only thread of law that might help." Willa stirred at that. "Law doesn't help," she murmured. Harlan looked at her. "Sometimes it don't. But sometimes it does. Depends who's swinging the hammer." They sat in silence for a while after that. Eli didn't sleep. Couldn't. He kept his eyes on the dark between the trees, ears tuned to every whisper of wind, every rustle in the frost. At one point, he thought he saw a figure move past the edge of the clearing, tall, slow, deliberate, but when he blinked, it was gone. He didn't mention it. At first light, they moved again. By midday, the trail had widened, and the snow began to thin. Pines gave way to more open stretches, broken only by occasional outcroppings of rock and brush. Harlan pointed ahead with his rifle. "See that ridge? Calhoun's just beyond it." Eli squinted. The ridge was jagged, steep. The trail curved up along its side like a cut from a dull knife, winding in switchbacks toward the top. It looked defensible. Too defensible. "Feels like a funnel," Eli muttered. Harlan nodded grimly. "Which is why we move fast." But fast wasn't easy. Willa was growing pale again, worn thin from the ride and the cold. Her eyes closed more often now, and when Eli reached back to steady her, her grip was slow to return. He knew the signs: fatigue, exposure, fear. The girl had gone too long without real rest, real comfort. He'd pushed her hard. Too hard, maybe, but there was no turning back. They made it halfway up the ridge before the shot rang out. It cracked through the cold air like a whip echoing off the rocks. Dusty reared, nearly throwing Eli and Willa. Harlan cursed, diving for cover behind a boulder. Another shot, then a voice, amplified by distance and arrogance. "That's far enough, Morgan." Eli dragged Willa down behind a jut of rock, checked her for blood. She was shaken but unhurt. He peered over the edge. For men, maybe 5, perched along the top of the ridge. Rifles trained down. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. One of the men stepped forward, and Eli recognized him immediately. Sheriff Clayton Shaw. Of all the men Darby could have bought, Shaw was the worst. Not because he was violent, though he could be, but because he wore law like a mask. Used it like a blade. Smiled while he ruined lives. "Hand over the girl, Eli," Shaw called. "No need for this to end in blood. Judge already signed a writ. She's a ward of the territory now. You're harboring her against the law." Harlan growled. "He's lying." Eli looked down at Willa, who had gone deathly still. "We can't shoot our way up," Harlan said. "But maybe what?" Harlan's eyes lit just a little. "There's an old miner's trail. Not much used. Cuts under the ridge. Dangerous, but if we move now," another shot rang out, hitting rock near Eli's head. "Move," he barked. They bolted down the slope, keeping to the shadows, zigzagging between boulders. The gunfire followed, but none of the shots found flesh. Willa clung to Eli like a shadow. Harlan led them to a cleft in the rock near the base, a narrow passage nearly hidden behind brush. "Here," he called. "Stay low." They slipped into the cut, darkness swallowing them fast. The trail was steep, more crevice than path, full of ice and loose stone. Willa slipped once, scraping her knee, but Eli lifted her into his arms and kept going. He could feel the heat of her skin even through her coat. Too hot. Fever was setting in. She leaned against his chest, whispering things he couldn't quite hear. Names, maybe. Fragments. At one point, she looked up, eyes glassy. Is Anna real? Eli's steps faltered. What? You talk about her in your sleep. He swallowed hard. Yeah, she was real. Did she die? Yes. Did it hurt? He looked ahead into the dark. Every day. She didn't ask more. The trail finally opened out into a shallow ravine on the other side of the ridge. Calhoun sat below them now, nestled along the frozen banks of the Astor River, smoke rising from chimneys, the courthouse spire just visible above the rooftops. Eli turned to Harlan. What's the plan? We go in. Quiet. Talk to Judge Harlan Webb. He's the only one who'll listen. Does he know we're coming? No, Eli sighed. Then we better pray he's in a good mood. They rode the last stretch slow. Shaw's men would expect them to try to flee east. They wouldn't think they'd double back toward town. Still, Eli kept one hand on his weapon the whole way. Calhoun wasn't much, just a dozen buildings, a stable, a saloon, and the courthouse. But it was cleaner than most, and the people watched them pass with wary eyes. Eli dismounted first, helped Willa down. She staggered. He caught her. I'm okay, she whispered. He didn't believe her, but nodded anyway. Harlan led them straight to the courthouse. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with dust and the scent of old paper. A clerk looked up, startled. We need Judge Webb, Harlan said. Urgent. The clerk opened his mouth to argue, then saw Eli's face, Willa in his arms, and the blood still dried into the hem of his coat. He didn't argue. They were led into a chamber that smelled of pipe smoke and ink. Judge Webb looked up from his desk, spectacles perched low. Harlan Graves, he said. I thought you were dead. Not yet. The judge stood, eyes flicking to Eli, then to Willa. Well, he said, this looks complicated. It is, Eli said. The door opened. Sheriff Shaw stepped in. Eli's hand went to his revolver. Harlan moved between them. Hold, the judge snapped. Everyone sit. They sat. Shaw sneered. Judge, I have a writ. That child is... Be quiet, Webb interrupted. He turned to Willa. Child, can you tell me your name? She swallowed. Willa. Willa Dane. And who left you in the snow? Willa stared at Shaw. He smiled. Her lip trembled. Speak, the judge said gently. Willa opened her mouth, closed it, then said, I saw him shoot a man. In the pass. Over supplies. Said it was an accident. But it wasn't. The room went still. Webb leaned back. Is that true, Sheriff? She's lying. I believe her. Shaw lunged. Eli moved faster. One punch, hard and clean, dropped the sheriff to the floor. Harlan grinned. Guess you still got it. Judge Webb stood. Get him out of here. The girl stays with Morgan. The clerk dragged Shaw away, swearing. Willa turned to Eli, and for the first time in days smiled. The courthouse emptied slow. First the clerk, then two deputies who'd come late to the scene, unsure whether to follow orders or wait for someone higher to tell them what to do. In the end, Webb made the choice easy. He told them to take the sheriff and go. When the heavy doors finally closed behind them, the room went quiet again, dust hanging in the slanted light from tall windows. Willa stood by the judge's desk, her small hands gripping the hem of her coat. She didn't look at anyone. Eli stood just behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder. Harlan leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, watching everything with the wariness of a man who knew this piece was too thin to last. Webb sat down heavily and rubbed his temples. She needs protection, Eli said quietly. She has it, the judge replied. So long as she's in this room. That's not enough. No, it's not. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers. The writ Shaw carried was forged. I can smell it. But that won't matter to Darby. If he sent Shaw to retrieve the girl, he'll send someone else now. Someone more dangerous. Someone with less patience and more reach. Harlan stepped forward. You can nullify it, though. I can, but it'll take time. Eli's voice was flat. We don't have time. Webb's eyes shifted to Willa, then back to Eli. Then we make time. I'll draft a protection order. Something solid. Something that'll stick even in territories like this one. But you need to take her somewhere safer while I work. Somewhere far. I know a woman east of the divide, Adele Chambers. She runs a mission school out past the timberline. Isolated but lawful. She'll take the girl in. She won't ask questions. Eli hesitated. And you trust her? Webb nodded. With my life. Eli looked down at Willa. She was still quiet, still frozen. But there was something different in her posture now, a stiffness that didn't come from fear. She was waiting, listening. Do you want that? He asked her softly. She didn't speak at first. Then, will you come with me? For now, I won't leave you alone. She nodded once. Webb stood and began gathering papers. Then go tonight. Take the west route. It'll take longer, but Darby's people will be watching the south road. Harlan stepped closer. I'll go with them. Eli shot him a glance. Thought you had people to warn. Eat dough, but they'll keep. This won't. Eli didn't argue. They left the courthouse just before dusk. Willa walked beside Eli now instead of behind. He didn't tell her to do that. She just did. As if some part of her had decided that after everything she'd been through, she didn't want to be the one hiding in the shadows anymore. The town was quiet. The kind of quiet that meant news had already spread. Doors were closed, curtains drawn. Eli could feel the eyes watching from behind glass, the weight of judgment without any of the facts. He didn't care. At the stable, Harlan secured 2 fresh horses. Strong, fussed. Eli helped Willa up into the saddle before mounting behind her. Harlan rode ahead again, guiding them past the main road and into the trees. They rode hard through the night, following the river west, cutting through patches of bare earth and thickets still heavy with snow. The moon was thin and high, barely enough light to see by. But Harlan had always been good at reading trails in the dark. Just before dawn, they reached a small ridge where the trees broke into a wide, open stretch of land. Ahead, the river bent sharply, vanishing behind a cluster of granite cliffs. That's where they saw the fire, a low glow tucked in the crook of the bend. Not natural, not accidental. Someone had built a camp down there. Harlan reined in. Trouble. Eli scanned the distance. How many? Hard to say. 2 fires, maybe 3 men. Could be scouts. We go around. Harlan frowned. Not much around to go. Cliffs to the right. Rapids to the left. Willa whispered, we can't go back. No, Eli said. We won't. He dismounted and helped Willa down. We move quiet. On foot. Stick to the trees. Harlan nodded. I'll cover from above. They split. Eli lifted Willa into his arms and began moving through the underbrush. The terrain was sharp and uneven, every step a risk, but he kept her close, her warmth pressed against his chest. She didn't cry, didn't tremble. She just watched the darkness with wide, unblinking eyes. They were halfway past the fire when the sound stopped him. Not footsteps, voices. Too close. He crouched low, cradling Willa against the earth. 2 figures passed just 10 feet away, rifles slung, laughter low and mean. They didn't see him. Not yet. Then one of them paused. You hear that? Eli didn't move. Didn't breathe. Willa's fingers dug into his sleeve. The man stepped forward, scanning the brush. Maybe an animal, the second muttered. No. Listen, a crack from the ridge. Sharp. Loud. The man jerked, then dropped. The second shouted, lifting his gun. Eli surged forward, slammed his shoulder into the man's side, knocking him down. They struggled, boots scraping against stone, hands clawing for purchase. Then Willa shouted, Eli, that pause was enough. Eli drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man gasped, eyes wide, and then slumped. Eli stood, panting. Harlan appeared seconds later, rifle in hand. They'll have heard that. We move. They ran. No time to check the horses. No time to plan. Just run. By sunrise, they'd put enough distance between them and the camp to catch their breath. But only barely. Eli collapsed near a fallen log, Willa still tight in his arms. She looked up at him, her face flushed from the sprint. Did you kill him? Yes. She nodded. Not afraid. Not shocked. Just understanding. I saw him, the one you knocked down. He had the same badge. Ili Thimsith. A sheriff's badge? She nodded. Like the one in town. The one who said he'd take me. Harlan cursed under his breath. Darby's paying sheriffs now, he muttered. Not just buying them. Replacing them. Eli looked down the trail. He won't stop. No, he won't. What does he want with her? Harlan hesitated. Then she saw something. Something worth killing for. Whatever that was. Land deal, murder, fraud. She's the thread that'll unravel it. Eli didn't respond. Willa looked up at them both. I don't want to be a thread, she said. I just want to be a girl again. Neither man had an answer. They reached the mission school just before dusk the next day. It stood alone in a shallow valley, surrounded by open fields and wooden fences. A chapel sat at the center, flanked by two long buildings, a dormitory and a kitchen hall. Smoke rose from the chimney. Children played in the distance, their laughter faint on the breeze. Eli dismounted and lifted Willa down. She stood on her own, brushing dirt from her coat. A woman stepped from a porch. Tall, weathered, eyes sharp behind round spectacles. Adele Chambers, she said. I was told to expect you. Harlan stepped forward. Judge Webb sent word. Adele nodded. We don't get many visitors, but we protect the ones we do. Willa stepped closer to Eli, voice trembling. Do I have to stay? Eli crouched beside her. You don't have to do anything, but this place is safe. She'll teach you, feed you, give you a bed that isn't cold. But what about you? He didn't answer right away. I'll be nearby. Not far. If you want me, I'll come. She looked at Adele. Do I get to decide? You do, Adele said. That's what safety means. Willa looked back at Eli, and for a long moment, her eyes searched his. Then she nodded. She walked toward the porch and took Adele's hand. Eli watched her go, every step like a break in the ice beneath him. Harlan put a hand on his shoulder. She'll be all right. I know. She trusts you. I know that too. Eli turned. But this ain't over. Not yet. No, Harlan said. Not by a long shot. From behind the chapel, a figure watched them. Dark coat. Gloved hands. Too still. Too familiar. Eli's blood went cold. He knew that silhouette, and he knew what it meant. Darby wasn't done. He just sensed something worse. The man in the dark coat didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch. Not when Eli turned toward him, not even when Harlan's hand went to his gun. He just stood there at the edge of the chapel shadow, where the last gold of sunset couldn't quite reach, like the sun itself refused to touch him. But Eli knew the name before he saw the face. Cole Maddox. Darby's shadow. His fist. The man he sent when everything else had failed. Nobody. No puppet at work. Just blood and silence. Years back, Maddox had been part of a private unit in the war. One of those detachments that never answered to generals, only orders whispered behind locked doors. He disappeared after the surrender, and the rumors that followed said he'd gone west, where the money was meaner and the law more forgiving. Darby found him there, kept him fed, paid, protected, let him off his leash when needed. Now he was here. Eli felt Willa's absence like a hole in his chest. She was inside, behind those walls, behind Adele's care. But walls wouldn't hold Maddox. Not if he wanted in. Harlan stepped forward slowly, voice level. Don't, he said. Not here. Maddox didn't answer. He raised one gloved hand and tipped his hat back just enough to show the dead calm in his eyes. Then he turned and walked away. No threats. No promises. Just a message. Harlan let out a breath. He'll come back. I know. When... Eli looked at the chapel roof, at the cross silhouetted against the blood-orange sky. When he wants to. They waited that night. Harlan took a position on the porch, shotgun across his lap. Eli stayed near the window of Willa's room, watching the trees, the chapel, the yard. Adele didn't protest. She offered them coffee and a place to warm up between shifts. She didn't ask questions, not even when Eli started hammering planks across the windows, reinforcing doors, checking the locks twice. By midnight, nothing. By dawn, still quiet. But Eli didn't trust quiet anymore. Not the way he used to. Willa woke slow, her hair tangled around her face, cheeks flushed with sleep. Eli was there before she opened her eyes, perched on the edge of the cot, already dressed and dusted with snow from the porch. "Where are we?" she murmured. "Mission school. Safe for now." She nodded and sat up. "You stay. Told you I would." Her eyes lingered on him. Then, softer, "You look tired." He didn't answer. Adele appeared behind him, holding a tray of food. "Thought you might need something warm. For both of you." Willa smiled faintly. "Thank you." Adele set the tray down. "Class starts late today. We've had harder winters. No one minds a slow morning." Eli followed her out into the hallway. "Thank you," he said. She gave him a long look. "I'm not doing this for you. I know. I'm doing it because I've buried too many girls who look just like her." Eli didn't flinch. "Same." Later that day, Harlan returned from the woods with a look that said more than words. Eli met him at the edge of the trees. "Tracks?" he asked. Harlan nodded. "Too many. For set's minimum. Maddox ain't alone. Darby sent more?" "No doubt. Looks like they're circling. Testing the place. Not attacking, not yet." Eli spat into the snow. "They're waiting for a weak point." Harlan nodded grimly. "And when they find one, they'll come hard." Eli's eyes moved toward the dormitory. "We can't hold this place. Not against the siege." "No, then we move." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "Again, we don't have a choice." Harlan glanced toward the chapel. "You really think she's strong enough for that?" Eli didn't answer, because he didn't know. By dusk, Adele had packed what supplies she could: food, water, blankets. She didn't try to talk Eli out of it. She only gave Willa a new coat and a note to give to someone named Esther on the other side of Pine Ridge. Another woman who'd lost more than most. Another woman who'd turned her grief into something useful. "She'll keep the girls safe," Adele said, "long as she's breathing." Harlan loaded the packs. Eli saddled the horses. Willa stood near the gate, watching the trees. She didn't ask why they were running again. She didn't cry either. She just took Eli's hand when he reached for her and said, "Okay." They rode out under a low gray sky, cold mist hanging over the valley like a breath not yet exhaled. Eli didn't look back. Not once. Harlan took point again, leading them northeast toward the ridge. But the land was unfamiliar now, twisted with snow melt and rockfall. Trails that had once been safe were now nothing but illusions. And Maddox followed. He didn't come close, didn't show his face again, but they knew he was there. The tension never left Eli's spine. He'd see a mark in the snow, a boot print half buried, the faint scent of smoke carried from somewhere too far to reach. Harlan saw it too. And Willa, she felt it. She never said it out loud, but her hand never left Eli's. Then came the night of the crossing. A river, half frozen, deep and fast. The bridge had been torn down months ago by flood. "No choice," Harlan muttered. "We swim or we die." Eli looked down at Willa. Her lips were pale, her coat soaked from mist and frost. "She won't make it through that water." "Then you carry her. I'll hold the bags." They stripped what they could, tied off the packs and oilskins. Eli hoisted Willa into his arms, wrapping her in the warmest blanket they had left. She didn't fight. She didn't flinch. She just pressed her face into his chest and closed her eyes. The water was worse than Eli expected. It hit like knives, biting into his legs, his chest. The current dragged at them, strong enough to twist him sideways, but he dug in, step by step, heart hammering in his ears. Harlan crossed behind them, swearing with every breath. Midway through, Eli's foot caught a stone and slipped. He went under, just for a second, but it was enough. Willa screamed as water surged over her. He surfaced, coughing, arms clenching around her. She was still there, still breathing, but her eyes were wide, wild with panic. "Hold on," he gasped. Almost another surge. Then Harlan's hand, grabbing his coat, pulling. They hit the far bank in a tangle of limbs and ice and soaked wool. Eli rolled, still holding Willa close. She sobbed once, just once, then curled against him, teeth chattering. Harlan knelt beside them. "We keep moving." Eli shook his head. "She needs warmth. No time." "We stop." Harlan started to argue. Then he saw the blood. Eli's side, ripped from a rock during the fall. Damn it, they made a fire. Just one. Risky but necessary. Willa huddled beside Eli, while Harlan stitched the wound with shaking fingers. Eli didn't cry out. Not once. He only watched the trees, eyes fixed on the dark. "He's here," he whispered. Harlan looked up. How close? Close enough to smell the smoke. The next morning, the tracks changed. Eli saw them first. Boots. Heavy. Deliberate. Leading toward a rise just north of their camp. He followed them, slow, rifle raised. At the top of the rise, a tree stood alone, and at the base of the tree, a satchel. He opened it carefully. Inside, folded neat, was a child's dress. Willa's, the one she'd lost weeks ago, torn and bloodied from that first night. Beneath it, a note. Only one word, return. Eli stared at it for a long time. Then he burned the dress and buried the ashes. When he returned to camp, Harlan saw his face and didn't ask. Willa did. What was it? Just a reminder, he said quietly, that we're not done. She looked at him with something more than fear now. Something sharper. I won't go back. He nodded. I won't let you. They moved again that night. No fire. No words. By dawn, the mountains had broken open, revealing the valley beyond. Pine Ridge, a town smaller than most, with buildings packed tight along a single winding street. A church, a schoolhouse, and a red-roofed inn with smoke curling gently from the chimney. Esther's place, Harlan said. We made it. Eli looked down at Willa. Her eyes were barely open. She was running almost alone now. They dismounted at the inn. A woman stepped out to greet them. Middle-aged, brown hair streaked with silver, eyes like steel. You must be Eli, she said. I am. And this is the girl? She's everything. Esther nodded. Then come inside. We've been expecting you. But back in the woods, by the tree where Eli had found the satchel, Maddox stood. He watched the last of the smoke from the burned dress curl into the air. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But he was smiling. And when he turned, two other men stepped from the trees behind him. Armed. Ready. He nodded once. Next time, he said. They won't get away. Then felt like something borrowed from a better world. The floors were clean, polished with years of quiet labor. The curtains hung in soft folds that smelled of lavender and hearth smoke. And though the wind still howled outside, it didn't seem to touch the windows, as if even the cold had been told it wasn't welcome here. Willa sat on a small bench near the stove, wrapped in a quilt Esther had pressed in her arms the moment they stepped inside. Her hair was damp from melted snow, her eyes rimmed red not from tears, but from sheer exhaustion. But she was upright, awake, watching. Eli stood near the door, arms crossed. His side throbbed with every breath, but he ignored it. Harlan paced near the back window, gazed darting from the trees to the road and back again. Esther poured tea into a chipped mug and handed it to Willa. You'll stay in the upstairs room. Second door on the left. No one comes in or out without me knowing. Willa took the cup and nodded. Thank you. Esther turned to Eli next. You need rest. Both of you. I'll take the floor, he said. You'll take the bed. I don't keep it there to impress furniture. Eli didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because his knees had begun to buckle the moment they stepped into the warmth. Esther caught the flicker in his eyes and pressed a hand to his arm. Go. I'll sit watch for a spell. He hesitated, then looked at Willa. She was watching him, her hands tight around the mug. I'll be right upstairs, he told her. I know. He climbed the stairs one at a time, the pain in his side flaring hot with every movement. The room was small, clean. A single bed, a basin, a window with the curtain drawn halfway. He dropped on a mattress and didn't remember falling asleep. Downstairs, Harlan leaned near Esther as he scanned the darkness. You got weapons? I've got sense, she said, and a rifle older than I am, but she still sings true when she needs to. Think they'll follow us here? They already have. Harlan's jaw tightened. How do you know? Esther nodded toward the fireplace. Because the dogs won't go near the back fence. Not since dawn. Harlan crossed the room and pushed open the back door. The snow was thick again, falling harder than it had the day before. Beyond the yard, the forest leaned in, trees cloaked in shadow and ice. The dogs sat huddled on the porch, their ears flat, their bodies tense. One let out a soft whimper when Harlan stepped forward. He looked down. Prince. barely visible in the new fall, but there, deep, heavy, boots, too big for Esther, too deliberate for any of the townsfolk. Harlan turned back inside. We have to move again. No, Esther said calmly. They expect that. They're counting on it. Then what do we do? Esther looked toward the stairs. We wait. Willa couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that meant you had to listen for things. For footsteps, for voices, for breath that wasn't your own. She slipped out of bed and crept to the window, lifting the curtain just enough to peek through. Snow, still falling, still whispering against the glass. But nothing else. She turned to go back to bed and froze. There, tucked between the quilt and the door, lay a folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. She picked it up slowly, unfolded it. One word, scrawled in thick ink, surrender. Her heart stopped. She dropped the paper and backed away, breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she ran, down the stairs, across the hall, into Esther's arms. He was here, she whispered. He came inside. Esther didn't ask who. She only held her, one arm pressing gently between Willa's shoulder blades, the other already reaching for the old rifle behind the stove. Eli came down the stairs next, pale and wide-eyed. What happened? She found a note. He turned to Harlan. We have to end this. That night, they prepared. Esther lit only 2 lamps, keeping the rest of the house dark. Harlan boarded the back door. Eli cleaned his rifle and checked the wound in his side. It was angry, swollen, but dry. Infection hadn't set in. Yet, Willa sat by the stove, the note still in her hand. You think he'll come tonight? She asked. Eli knelt beside her. Yes. She nodded. I'm not afraid. He brushed her hair back gently. You're allowed to be. She looked up at him, and something fierce burned behind her eyes. I'm not. The first shot came just before midnight. It hit the front door. Splintered wood. A warning. Eli and Harlan moved fast, rifles ready, breath held. Esther ushered Willa into the pantry behind the kitchen, where the walls were thickest. Don't come out unless I say, she whispered. Not even if you hear my voice. Willa clutched her arm. Don't leave me. I'm not. She shut the door and locked it from the outside. Outside, the snow danced. 3 figures moved from the tree line, dressed in gray and black. Faces hidden beneath scarves and shadow. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They knew what they were doing. Maddox led them. Eli waited until the second shot, then fired. A flash. A crack. One man fell. The others scattered. Harlan flanked left, disappearing into the snowdrift. Esther climbed to the second floor, rifle in hand, eyes narrowed to slits as she found her mark. Another shot. Another shout. Then silence. And then a scream. Not from the men. From the pantry. Eli's heart seized. He bolted. The door was open. The lock broken. Inside, only the quilt remained. And the note. A new one. You took her. Now I take her back. The cold air hit Eli like a hammer as he tore into the yard. Harlan met him at the edge of the barn. They have her, Eli shouted. He took her. He took Willa. Harlan didn't ask. He just ran. Tracks led north. Fussed. Heavy. Willa's prints too, small, skipping dragged. Eli didn't think. He followed. His wound burned, breath short, but he ran until the trees blurred around him, until the pain disappeared under the roar of his own pulse. Then he saw them. A clearing. Maddox, standing at the center, holding Willa by the wrist. She was fighting him, kicking. He didn't flinch. He raised his hand and drew a pistol. Eli didn't shout, didn't warn. He just fired. Maddox jerked sideways. The bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him. Willa broke free and ran. Eli reached her in 4 long strides, sweeping her up into his arms. Maddox turned, bleeding, laughing. You think this ends with me? He rasped. You think you've saved her? Eli's voice was ice. No, but I'll bury you anyway. He fired again. And this time, Maddox didn't laugh. He fell. Harlan emerged from the trees seconds later. Eli was already kneeling, holding Willa close, his hand shaking. You're okay, he whispered. You're okay. She clung to him, face buried in his coat. I knew you'd come, she whispered. Harlan looked down at Maddox, then toward the rising light in the east. We should go. The others might come. No, Eli said. They won't. By sunrise, the trail was gone, covered by snow. Maddox's body left beneath a cairn of stone and silence. They returned to the inn. Esther met them with tears in her eyes. She hugged Willa like a mother, then stepped back, her hand pressed to her mouth. I thought, she began. But you didn't, Willa interrupted. You waited, just like you said. That night, Willa slept without waking. Eli sat by the fire, one hand wrapped around a mug, the other resting near the rifle by his knee. Harlan leaned against the doorframe. She's strong, he said. Stronger than either of us. Harlan nodded. Darby, I'll go after him. When? Eli looked into the fire. When she no longer needs me. Harlan hesitated. You think that day'll come? Eli didn't answer, because deep down, he hoped it never would. The letter came 2 weeks after the snow began to melt. It was sealed in thick wax, the envelope plain, but the handwriting unmistakable, tight, slanted, formal. Eli stood with it in his hand for a long time before opening it, the fire crackling behind him, Willa's quiet laughter drifting from the loft where she was helping Esther braid hers for drying. He broke the seal and read the words once, twice, then folded the letter and slipped it into the stove without a word. Harlan watched it blacken and curl. What did it say, he asked. Eli didn't look up. Darby wants a meeting. Harlan raised a brow. What kind of meeting? Called it a negotiation. Which means trap. Which means I go alone. Harlan scowled, arms crossed. That your way of saying, I'm not invited? It's my way of saying, I don't want you buried next to Maddox. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Harlan's jaw shifted. Where? Eli's hand drifted to the rifle leaning beside the chair. Old mining church off Red Hollow. The one with the broken spire. Harlan let out a low breath. Course it is. I'll leave at dawn. You planning on coming back? I'm planning on finishing it. Willa knew before Eli told her. She always did. They sat together on the back steps of the inn that night, the air soft with the scent of thawing earth and wet pine. The snow had receded into patches now, hiding in the shade, stubborn and quiet. Willa's knees were pulled up to her chest, her fingers laced together tight. You're going after him, she said softly. Eli didn't lie. Yes. She nodded. I thought you might. He looked at her. She was smaller than she had been that first day, or maybe just thinner beneath the layers of blankets and wool, but her eyes had grown larger somehow. Wiser. Older. The way grief makes you old long before your time. I'll be back, he said. She turned toward him. Promise? I do. She hesitated. But you lied before. About staying. About the end. Eli's throat tightened. You're right. So this time, you should promise something else. He tilted his head. Like what? Willa blinked slowly. Promise you'll try. He reached out and took her hand, small and warm and trembling. I promise. The church looked even worse than Eli remembered. The roof had caved in toward the north end, letting light stream in like an unwanted guest. The pews were all but gone, bones of old wood and dust curling at the edges. The cross above the pulpit had been broken in two, the upper half missing, the lower still nailed crookedly to the stone. Darby was already there. He sat where the altar used to be, flanked by 2 men Eli didn't recognize. Young, clean-cut, city-fed. They didn't fit the ruin. Darby did. He always had. Eli stepped into the open without a weapon raised. Just his hands at his sides, coat fluttering behind him in the wind that howled through the empty windows. You came, Darby said. You sent Maddox after a little girl. I sent Maddox after a witness. She wasn't one. She became one. Eli stopped 10 paces from the altar. You want to finish this, Darby? Or you want to keep hiding behind children and hired men? Darby smiled faintly. I'm not hiding. You are. Eli's eyes narrowed. Not anymore. Darby stood, smoothing his coat. He walked forward slowly, the sound of his boots echoing against the stone. You were a good lawman, Eli. Even after her, I thought you might come back. That the grief might make you sharp. It did, Eli said. Just not for you. Darby stopped a few feet away. You're standing in the same place I made you once kneel. Eli's voice was quiet. And you're standing where my wife died. That silenced Darby. For a moment, at least. Justice isn't always clean, he said finally. No, Eli agreed. But it sure as hell ain't yours to twist. Darby reached into his coat and pulled out a small revolver. The two men beside him didn't move. They knew what this was. Eli didn't reach for his own. You gonna shoot me, Darby? He asked. Depends. On what? On whether or not you walk away. Eli looked past him, through the ruined walls, to the trees beyond. The path home. The road back to Willa. I'm not walking away. Darby raised a gun, and Harlan stepped out from the rafters, gun in hand. Drop it, he said. Darby froze. Eli blinked. Harlan, you didn't think I was going to let you have all the damn fun, did you? Darby's men went for their weapons. Too slow. 2 shots. Clean. They hit the ground like sacks of flour. Darby turned the gun toward Harlan, but Eli was faster. The bullet caught Darby just above the belt. Not fatal. Not fast. But enough. He dropped the gun and crumpled, groaning. Eli walked over and knelt. You sent a child to die, he whispered. Darby coughed. She was leverage. Eli didn't blink. You don't get to say her name. Darby's eyes rolled, his breath hitching. Helmi, numero Elistud, and left him there. They rode slow back to Pine Ridge. Snowmelt turned the trail to mud, but neither of them cared. Harlan had a graze along his arm. Nothing deep. Eli said nothing for most of the journey. Just kept his eyes forward. At the ridge above the town, they stopped. The sun was setting, and the inn's roof glowed red. Eli turned to Harlan. She's all that's left. Harlan nodded. You gonna stay? Eli didn't answer, but he didn't ride on either. Willow was in the garden behind the inn when she saw the horses. She stood slowly, dirt on her hands, a small sprout in her palm. Her heart beat so loud it blocked out the birds, the wind, everything. Eli dismounted and didn't say a word. He just walked forward and opened his arms. She ran into them, dropping the plant, flinging herself at him so hard it knocked the wind out of his chest. You came back, she whispered. I tried, he said, choking on the words. Like I promised. She pulled back and looked up at him. No, she said. You kept it. Spring came fast that year. The town thawed. So did Eli. He stayed. Not just days. Not just weeks. He fixed the fence behind the inn. Helped Esther carry crates to the school. Walked Willa to class. Waited outside with a rifle once, when a rider passed too slow by the gate. She didn't notice. He did. Harlan moved on eventually, headed east toward his brother's place. He left without fanfare, just a handshake and a smile and the promise of a letter. Esther planted lilacs by the porch. Willa kept the first one pressed between pages in her book. On the anniversary of Anna's death, Eli brought a candle to the church in Pine Ridge. The pastor didn't ask why. He just nodded and left him be. Eli lit the flame, set it near the altar, and knelt. He stayed there until the wax ran low, until his legs ached and his breath steadied. Then he stood and walked home. It wasn't overnight. Nothing ever is. But seasons change, and so did Eli. He laughed again. Not often, not loud, but real. Willa grew. She ran faster, asked more questions. Forgot how her hands used to shake every time someone raised their voice. They planted tomatoes that summer. Eli built her a swing. Esther caught them both on it one afternoon, Willa shouting with glee as Eli pushed, grinning wider than she'd ever seen. And for a moment, just a flicker, it felt like the world had bent back into something worth believing in. One evening, as the leaves turned gold, Willa stood at the edge of the fence, watching the road. She didn't look scared anymore. Just thoughtful. Eli joined her. You thinking of leaving someday? He asked. She nodded. Maybe. He smiled. I'll walk you to the edge of town. She looked up. And wait until I come back. Always. She leaned her head against his arm. You're not just safe, you know. Ili tlinked. What do you mean? You're home. He swallowed hard. The wind rustled the trees, soft and warm. Eli looked down at her. This girl who had once been a shadow, a secret, a storm. Now she was sun. And he knew, finally, what second chances were for.